Good afternoon, everyone. We're speaking on the traditional territory of the signatories of Treaty 7, and I would like to acknowledge the Métis people of Alberta who share a deep connection with this land. I would also like to extend my deepest condolences to the family and colleagues of Strathcona County RCMP officer who was killed this morning in the line of duty. This morning, the Premier Office issued a statement that the Ethics Commissioner has now initiated an investigation into Daniel Smith's interference in the justice system. First, I want to say I welcome this investigation. As you may likely know, I wrote to Commissioner Dressler requesting an investigation on March 31st, 2023. But I want to stress that it's not nearly enough. First, let me talk about my letter to the Commissioner, in which I wrote that I believe Daniel Smith had violated Section 3 of the Conflict of Interest Act. The Act is breached in this section if any elected member uses their office or powers to influence or to seek to influence a decision to be made by or on behalf of the Crown to further a private interest of the member or a person directly associated with the member, or to improperly further another person's private interest. It is my view that the recorded conversation between Daniel Smith and extremist Arthur Pawlowski in early January provided clear evidence that Daniel Smith was going to use her power and influence as Premier to influence judicial proceeding involving Pawlowski, a man charged with inciting violence against police at the Coutts blockade, a blockade that went on for days, cost hundreds of millions of dollars to our Alberta economy, and where a stash of weapons, ammunition, and body armor was seized by law enforcement. One person has been convicted of assault with a weapon for speeding their truck at a police officer. 4 others are waiting trial for conspiracy to murder police officers. Prosecutor Stephen Johnston has described a speech Pawlowski gave at the blockade as an overt threat to violence, and noted he specifically said, and I quote, "For freedom to be preserved, people must be willing to sacrifice their lives. This is overtime," end quote. Pawlowski's trial lasted 2 days in Lethbridge, but before it began, Daniel Smith was recorded telling him that she had been talking to Crown prosecutors almost weekly about whether the case was in public interest. She also talked about her dissatisfaction with the Crown tactics with the Deputy Attorney General of the time. This was a gross abuse of power and put a great deal of political pressure on the Crown. So I welcome a full investigation from the Ethics Commissioner. But as I said, I want to stress that this investigation does not go far enough. We continue to call for a fully independent judicial investigation as well. Only a judge could look at breaches of other legislation and could conduct interviews concerning matters not covered in the Conflict of Interest Act or Section 3 of the Act. Additionally, the outcome of an Ethics Commissioner investigation will relate only to the interests of Arthur Pawlowski, how it was influenced by Daniel Smith. The Premier's actions are a clear violation of the rule of law, and she should be held accountable for that. Finally, the sanctions for a breach of the Conflict of Interest Act is limited to Legislative Assembly, which is held by a UCP majority. Consequences for Daniel Smith's wrongdoing must also be a matter for the judicial system and not solely the legislature. So I'm here today to also continue to call for a fully independent investigation by a judge. The Premier could launch this today. Albertans deserve answers. They fear they have a premier who thinks she is above the law, or that the laws of our province don't apply to her and her extremist friends. This is wrong. The foundation of our justice system has been shaken, and Albertans deserve full answer on what happened here before they cast a vote in May. Thank you, and I'm happy to take your questions.
Okay, any questions in person, any other questions online?
Maybe we can wait while we get the light back. Jordan with CTV News, but I did want to ask you, assuming that this investigation is launched off of your letter, did you receive any response from the Ethics Commissioner, and when did you find out about this investigation?
Ethics Commissioner acknowledged receipt of my letter, but under Section 26, the confidentiality provision, they are not required to confirm whether it's in response to my letter or not. But we found out from the release that Premier Office sent this morning, confirming that they are under investigation.
Okay, so just to confirm, when did you receive the confirmation from the Ethics Commissioner that the letter was received?
I think that was same day on March 31st.
And what do you foresee coming from this? Even from the Ethics Commissioner's own website, we know that when it comes to the Act, it can be kind of narrow in scope in what it can look like. It looks at the private interests and whether or not that was breached. What do you foresee that could potentially come from this? Are you concerned that that scope is fairly narrow?
A couple of things. One, that Section 3 is about public office holder using their office powers to influence or seek to influence a Crown decision to improperly further some private individual interests. So that what happened when Premier was talking to Arthur Pawlowski. Secondly, we understand that the scope is limited. That's why we continue to call for an independent judicial investigation, which can look at it more broadly from the time that Danielle Smith took power. And after that, she has admitted a number of times on video to a far-right website first that she has been in touch with Crown prosecutors. She has talked to Attorney General and Deputy Attorney General. She talked to media saying exact same words, that she has been talking to Crown prosecutors regularly. So this is third or fourth time that she has admitted that she has been talking to Crown prosecutors about these cases, telling them what to do, what not to do. So that's why we continue to call for a full independent investigation by a judge that can look beyond this phone call between Arthur Pawlowski and Danielle Smith.
Adam Eckler here with Global News. What are your expectations for a timeline on this? Obviously, we have an election on May 29th. The website of the Ethics Commissioner says typically this takes between 6 and 8 weeks in normal investigation. So what are your expectations in terms of that timeline and making sure that information is out there once an investigation is concluded?
As you said, Ethics Commissioner has its own procedures in place, so I wouldn't comment on that. But what we have been saying, and we are reiterating our call today, is that there need to be an independent judicial investigation that should be concluded before Albertan head into election. And example we have is that Casey Meadow, when he was found to have called Edmonton police chief about his traffic ticket. Then Premier Jason Kenney launched an investigation, and Justice Adele Kent was able to conclude that within 33 days. So Premier can call it now, and Albertan will have answers before they head into election.
This is a pretty complex story. There's been a lot said about it and kind of a lot of different angles to it. How do you think this is resonating with Albertans here? As you know, it is quite complex at this point. How do you think that resonates with regular Albertans?
I think it's a deeply concerning issue. At stake is the independence of our judicial system. At stake is our democracy. So Albertans are certainly concerned. Many Albertans have weighed in on this, and I think only thing that can restore Albertan trust and faith in independence of their judicial system is an independent investigation. That's why we have been calling for one, and if Danielle Smith has nothing to hide, she should commit to one today.
Okay, other questions on the line? First question goes to Dean Bennett.
Okay, so yeah, I'm not sure if there's any more to add on the ethics commissioner, but I do want to ask about a couple of other things that have arisen over the last couple of days. So now the premier says in a phone call that she doesn't believe is being taped. She says in early January, Archer, thanks for following your advocacy and nice to connect with you. And now 3 months after that, she tells us she disagrees with his extreme views. What do you think about that? And also as a sideline, what do you think about the fact that the premier keeps going back and forth, saying she can't talk about this case because it's before the courts, and then she talks about it? There you go, 2 questions.
Thank you, Dean. Premier's story keeps changing. When she is behind closed doors, she tells people that she has been talking to Crown prosecutors, she has been talking to Deputy AG and is dissatisfied with Crown tactics. And in public, she says that somehow this language was imprecise. No reasonable person thinks that this is an imprecise language when Premier repeats herself over and over that she has been in touch with Crown prosecutors on weekly basis, on regular basis. She is dissatisfied with Crown tactics. And secondly, I kind of forgot the second part.
She talks about Pawlowski, how she seems to laud him in private, but then denounces him in public.
She thinks that she shouldn't have been taped, but Albertan believe that she shouldn't have been engaged with someone with such extreme views who has been charged with criminal offenses on the eve of his trial. That's inappropriate for Premier to engage with him and then tell him that she is impressed with his advocacy and tell him that she has talked to Crown prosecutors weekly and tell him that she is dissatisfied with Crown tactics in his particular case. That's offside, and that's why we have been asking that an independent investigation be launched, because Premier has repeated herself quite a few times that she has been talking to Crown prosecutors, she has been interfering in the justice system. Albertans deserve answer, and a full judicial investigation can provide those answers to Albertans.
Is there a follow-up?
Okay. Yeah, thanks. Another issue that I've been looking into, I wonder if any been in cabinet. I'm looking at the oath that the premier took on October 11th. I wonder if she broke her oath here. So she says in that oath, and you have to say, I keep all confidences in cabinet, and I will pursue my job with, I think it was the diligence and being circumspect. So it seems to me that if you're telling an accused before trial what conversations you're having with the Attorney General about, i.e. your disagreements with document dumps, and if you're telling, is that not violating your cabinet confidence? And you certainly can argue that that's being circumspect in your job. Is there anything to this? And if there is, does it matter that the Premier might have broken her oath?
I think, as I said in my remarks, that the investigation Ethics Commissioner is conducting is narrow in scope, relates to Section 3. And we do think that there are other laws that may have been compromised. We do think that there are other conventions that may have been compromised, and that's why we need a full judicial investigation in this matter.
Okay, this question goes to Alana Smith.
Okay, thanks for taking my question. This one's more for clarification. So I know in the statement from Premier Smith's office, it says, has interfered with the administration of justice in relation to a COVID prosecution. Obviously, we know that Mr. Pawlowski is facing criminal charges, So I'm wondering, like, can we say with 100% certainty that that's the case they're investigating, or could it be something else?
No, I won't be able to say with 100% certainty. As I said, there are confidentiality provision, and there is nothing in that act that requires commissioner to confirm it to me what they are investigating. But that's the thing Premier Office can and should clarify, because Arthur Pawlowski is not charged with just COVID offenses. These are criminal offenses, and he's also charged with Infrastructure Defense Act.
Is there a follow-up on that?
Yeah, I guess I'm just wondering, so how do you take that first sentence in their statement when it does, it is quite vague and just says, a COVID prosecution? Because I know that Smith has talked kind of frequently about there's multiple cases that she's looking at and whether or not this could be one of those other ones.
I think what I can say with certainty is that we sent Ethics Commissioner complaint under Section 3 of the Conflict of Interest Act, and it was in relation to Arthur Pawlowski's criminal charges. And I have read the release. It is not very clear. As I said, Premier Office can and should confirm whether it's a separate investigation.
Okay, we'll go to our next caller.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. It's Lisa Johnson calling from the Journal. I'm wondering, Irfan, if you can just comment generally on what you're hoping for the outcome of this ethics investigation to be, because we know from the past that in previous cases, the ethics commissioner is a little bit limited in the scope of what kind of sanctions she can recommend. Sometimes it's just asking for an apology from the legislature or a fine of $500. So I'm wondering from your perspective what the best case scenario result is from this investigation.
As I said earlier, interference in judicial system is a deeply concerning and serious matter. And as opposition, our job is to hold this premier, this government accountable in every way possible. The provision of the Conflict of Interest Act, as you stated, is narrow in scope, and it only deals with a member, or in this case, premier, using her office and power to influence a Crown decision to further improperly some individual's interests. We believe that the phone call between Arthur Pawlowski and Danielle Smith is a clear evidence that Section 3 was breached. So I will leave that for the Ethics Commissioner to decide. But there are larger issues that need to be looked into, because prior to this call with Arthur Pawlowski, Premier has said multiple times that she has been talking to Crown prosecutors. She has said multiple times that she have talked to Attorney General and the Deputy Attorney General about these cases. So those comments do raise serious questions for the broader justice system, and that's why we are still asking that a judicial investigation, an independent investigation, be launched today, so Albertans can know what extent Premier has interfered in the justice system, and they have all the answers before they go into the polls on May 29th.
Is there a follow-up, Lisa?
Yeah, kind of sidebar to that. I think the Premier's office has suggested that that the Alberta NDP has made defamatory comments, and they've also suggested that they're considering a lawsuit against the CBC in regards to their reporting on this issue. Have you received any kind of notice of a defamation lawsuit
No,
from the Premier's office or the government?
No, I haven't, and I do have some legal background too. I can tell you that best defense to defamation is truth, And whatever we are saying or have been saying is just what Premier said on videos, Premier said in different conversations. We are not making anything up. We are just repeating exactly what Premier said multiple times.
Okay, next question goes to Graham Thompson.
Yeah, thanks. Just going back to a point that Alana raised, if the action by the ethics commissioner, of course, we have not had a chance to talk to her because it's Easter Monday, no one seems to be around. If that action by her is a response to your complaint, in fact, haven't you, in a sense, given her a legitimate reason not to answer questions now? Because, as been mentioned earlier, you know, a straightforward investigation takes 6 to 8 weeks. The election is going to be called, if all goes according to plan, on May the 1st in 3 weeks. So it's unlikely to get a decision in the next maybe 2 months. So haven't you given her, in a sense, through your complaint, a reason then not to talk or answer questions about this?
I think after sending a notice to CBC, she also said that she won't comment on it further. But then the last radio show, she also came up with a new story, I believe explanation number 5, that it was a conversation between two party leaders. So I highly doubt that she will refrain from commenting on it. But having said that, Ethics Commissioner investigation is narrow in scope. That's why we have been asking that there be an independent investigation similar to one that Jason Kenney launched into the issue of Casey Maddow calling a chief of police over a traffic ticket. That investigation was concluded within 33 days. If Danielle Smith has nothing to hide, she can launch an investigation today, and Albertan will have answer before they head into the polls.
Do you plan on talking to the commissioner or asking her to keep in mind the election coming up and to get a report out before the election? Like, do you plan on contacting the commissioner in that regard?
I think my role is to send the complaint, and commissioner is the independent officer of the legislature. They decide their own procedure and timelines, so I will not interfere in any of that.
Okay, we'll then pass for questions either in person or on the line. And seeing none, that's all for today.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for watching, and to learn more, check out albertasfuture.ca.